Good morning. This is Marvin Brook. I'm with CareerPoint, and we'll be doing a presentation today on how does your cash flow as a cooperative effort between CareerPoint and Community Action Marin. The how do your cash flow will be about budgeting and mindful money management. And in today's session, we're going to be looking at some major things of importance when it comes to how you control your cash flow and your expenses. So the first thing is, what is a positive net cash flow and why is it important? How do you find the money to put into savings? And how can you build a money action plan to improve your financial situation? These are questions you will need to ask yourself. Now, the first thing is understanding your cash flows. Okay? First thing you have to know is, where do I stand today? If you don't know your current situation, you can't figure out what the action plan that you should take in order to improve it. So you have to know what is coming in and what is going out. So the inflow questions you got to ask yourself are, what are my available resources? How often do I receive money and how much? If you work, do you get paid every week? Do you get paid daily? Do you get paid every 2 weeks? Does the money come to you in cash? Is it a direct deposit? So identify your income. And what are other income supports? Some of you might be getting aid of some sort, Medicaid, some assistance, okay? You got to remember, when you're getting Medicaid, that's the same as someone paying your expenses, your health expenses for you, and it's the same as income. Then you also have to ask yourself about non-financial resources. These would be things like subsidized childcare. Maybe you have a family member that's taking care of your children, okay? Training, maybe you're getting specialized training that you're not have to pay for. Maybe you exchange some skill sets for some other skill sets, sort of a bartering. You have to take that into consideration. So that's the inflow issues. The next questions you have to ask yourself are about outflow. These are questions such as, what are my major expenses? Now, what are my fixed expenses? These are the expenses to stay the same every month. That could be your rent. If you're a homeowner, that could be your mortgage. It could be your health insurance. It could be your car insurance. It could be something you pay for every month, utilities. All these things that are constant expenses. And then there are the flexible expenses. These are expenses that you can adjust or change. Now, one could be food. You could go from going out to eat or getting snacks to a situation where you're just buying groceries and making food, okay? Entertainment, clothing, travel. These are expenses that are flexible and change, and these are expenses that you can control. Some questions you might ask yourself, are you spending money according to your values? Does the money you spend advance your life? A very important question you need to ask yourself. So to be able to really analyze your inflows and your outflows, you really have to collect information. So the first thing you have to look at if you're working is understand your paychecks and your benefit summaries. In many cases, you might have direct deposit, but then you have a pay stub, and it explains to you what is your gross income, how much did you make for the week, how much went to your income tax, your withholding, how much went to FICA or Social Security. Maybe you have some money that's going to direct deposit. Maybe you have money that's going to disability insurance. Maybe you have money that's going to the bank. So understand your paycheck. Learn how to read it. Now use your financial statements. You know, those of you that have a banking relationship, understand how much money is in your checking, how much is in your saving. If you're using a debit card or a credit card, look at those statements. It tells you what you're spending money on. Very, very important for you to understand your outflows is to be able to get a opportunity to look at what you're spending. If you're spending money in cash, get receipts. Review your receipts. Organize your information. Your ability to manage your cash flow is directly related to your ability to understand what you are bringing in, what is going out, where are the opportunities to reduce savings, reduce expenses, and increase savings. Inflow minus outflow equals net cash flow. This is not a real complicated equation, but it's really one of the most important equations in all of your financial life, because at the end of the day, life is cash flow. Either you can pay your bills or you can't. And the goal is to have more inflow than outflow, and that creates a positive net cash flow. And that's the opportunity to save money. Now, what if your inflow doesn't cover your outflow? Well, time to make adjustments. And this is, again, very simple. You only have two choices, really. You find more income or resources, or you spend less money. Okay? You need a positive cash flow to build savings, and you need a positive cash flow to be able to move forward in your life. To have some element of a break even is to be able to have a net cash flow. Expand your resources. First thing you have to ask yourself is, how do you increase your inflow? If you're working, you got to ask yourself, can I get a better job that pays more money? Can I go to my boss and get some overtime? Can I take on another job? Okay? Maybe you have short-term activities, something you can do part-time and helps you get there. Another thing about expanding your resources is looking at long-term planning. Maybe you need to consider going back to school, getting more education so you can get a better job. And build resources by working together. This is where your ability to go to CareerPoint, to go to Community Action Marin, and find out about government programs, community efforts. Find out opportunities to create more prosperity by working together with all of these different resources. Now, when you're looking at expenses, there's always the expression wants versus needs. So you really have to first look at your must-have expenses. These are the basic things that all of us need to have to get on with our lives. We need a place to live. You either are renting or you're owning, you're living on your own, you're living with your family, a lot of different options, okay? We all need health care. We need to be able to have access to health care, to doctors, to providers, okay? We need transportation. We need to get from point A to point B. In California, in our area, we need to be able to get access to public transportation, and if we can't, we need to figure out another way, automobiles. Clothing, we all need to put clothes. And of course, we need food. And it's food that we can get by making our own, or food we can get by going out to eat. All of these must-haves are providing you with opportunities to make choice. Yes, you need a place to live, but you could live in point A or you could live in point B. Point A costs this much, point B costs that much. Same thing with transportation, with food, with clothing. Always look for opportunities to be able to reduce the cost of your must-haves. One of the problems a lot of us have is what we consider must-haves, other people might say are just simply wants. And we got to be able to make that distinction, okay? Then, again, what type of expenses are wants? You know, do I want a cell phone, the most expensive phone? Or can I get a phone that's less expensive? You know, how many of you have iPhones and you could get a phone that's less expensive? Very, very important. As you look at our little picture up here, you can see money going down the drain. That is not something you want to do. When you're looking at transportation, can you afford a new car? Maybe you should get a used car. Maybe you should take public transportation. Shopping, how many times have you gone shopping and at the spur of the moment wanted to buy things without thinking about them? One thing we have to understand, when you have limited resources, it is very, very important that you think about everything that you're spending money on. Very, very important, because you do have limited resources. Very important. Now, smart spending is really mindful spending. You really have to think about everything you spend money on when you have limited resources. The wealthier you get, the more money you have, the more able you are to be less attentive to everything you spend. But when you have limited resources, you need to think about everything you spend. So the first thing you must do is identify what you want. When you made a clear decision that you need this piece of clothing, then the next thing you have to do is shop around. Try to find the best place and the most prudent place to buy your clothes, let's say. Okay, and that's where the internet comes in, gives you an opportunity to see ways to save money. Make your own decisions. And that's an important thing. Don't let media tell you what you need. Sometimes we get caught up in the newest phone, the newest this, the newest that. Once you have something, sometimes things break. When I was growing up as a kid, a lot of times things would get fixed. Now we're more on a buy it if it's not working anymore. That's a decision you have to make. The other thing you have to do is think about sharing, trading, or borrowing. A lot of times you need something like a tool to work on at home, some sort of tool like a drill or something, and you don't use it that often. Figure out a way to borrow it, trade it, maybe you rent it, okay? Again, bargain for lower prices. But in our day, with so much information online, we should be able to find the best cost things by just doing our due diligence. Another thing we talk about with smart spending, and this gets into the whole issue of having good credit, bad credit, is pay your bills on time. The very, very important thing, because if you don't, you end up getting into a situation where you're going to end up spending more money because you get worse credit. Now, what are the expenses that can be reduced? Now, I'm a firm believer just about any expense can be reduced when you look at what you're spending money on. One of the things we find out a lot is convenience is costing us money. It's very convenient to go to Starbucks every morning and get your cup of coffee, okay? And convenience is nice. We like this. But if you have limited resources, it makes more sense to buy your own coffee, allow yourself the time, make it at home. Because again, convenient isn't always better or more fun. And again, the other thing is how can we pay less for more? And again, when it comes to food, it's always going to be less expensive to buy your own groceries and to make your own food. Entertainment, with the internet being the way it is, with the various streaming services, a lot of this stuff, there's ways to bring those costs down, to bring cable down and use the internet, use some of the streaming services. It's a lot less expensive to be a member of Hulu for a month for $7 than it is to go to the movies for $12. Financial services, are you paying for credit cards? Are you paying for banking? Maybe you could find a way to save money on that. Clothing, we've brought this up before, but clothing is a real good opportunity to spend less money on clothing because there's always an opportunity to find something that's less expensive. And the list goes on and on and on. If you're going traveling, there's a cheaper way to travel. Anything that we spend money on, once we've identified it as something that we want, then there's always the opportunity to do it in a most expeditious way and save ourselves money. Now, the expenses that can be cut. So let's say one snack a day makes a difference, and this alludes back to my mentioning of Starbucks. If you're going to Starbucks every day, and let's say it's $5 per day, then it's going to be $150 a month, and that's going to be $1,800 a year. You can see how those sort of things can get very, very expensive. If you can reduce those things, that gives you the opportunity to have more money for other things. Again, the theme of us and what we're talking about today is how to stretch your money and how to make sure you get the most out of it. And again, and this is always a philosophical thing and a lifestyle thing, are you paying for stuff that you can live without? So that's why it's very, very important to look at your expenses, write them down, and ask yourself, what can I do without? Write down what we call an expense elimination commitment and try to add that money to your savings account. So it's very important for you to consider how to find some financial balance. Financial counselors recommend saving at least 10% of income. The question is, do you know what percentage you are saving? Now, this is a very, very important issue. You got wants, you got must-haves. And in terms of the 10%, that might not always be a realistic goal or an ability that you have to do. You really have to make sure that you've totally understood what your must-haves are and what your wants are. A lot of times, one of the ways to do it is to really identify every day what you're spending money on. I'm a firm believer if you keep track of your daily spending, you'll begin to see those opportunities. And again, the goal should always try to be, is there ability for me to save some money? Okay, and this is where we get into how do we save? How do we generate more savings? So the bottom line is earn more, spend less. It sounds simple, but it's not always easy. Now, when I was growing up, and the old way used to be you earn your money, you spend your money, and if you get lucky, you have some savings, and that's how it goes. What we found out now is it is better to think in terms of the new way. Earn your money, save a certain amount first, and then spend less. Again, a question we could ask here is how many people have direct deposit? How many people have money going directly to some savings account? Something where they don't even see the money. Maybe you're at a workplace that has a 401k, some benefit plan, and you're saving money in that format. Okay? So, what you're trying to do here is have the money taken out before you see it, and then you learn to live on less. So, income less savings equals spending. So, very, very important issue. Earn minus spend equals save is the old way of thinking. Earn minus save equals spend is the new way of thinking. And again, try to use your money effectively, strategically to help meet your goals. So you want to be what we call budget wise. And what we're trying to do is make sure that your budget or your spending plan, I think a spending plan reflects a more new term than budgets, which sound like a very restrictive thing. So you want to make sure the money that you're spending reflects your values, your priorities, and your financial goals. And when we talk about goals, there are short-term goals. Maybe you're in debt and you just want to get out of debt. Midterm goals. Maybe you would like to take a vacation in 6 months. Long-term goals. Maybe you want to be able to buy a new car in 3 years. Maybe you want to go back to school. If you're older, maybe you're thinking about retirement. So goals are short-term, midterm, long-term. So once you've established, again, the must-haves that support the lifestyle you want to live, you must identify the best way to meet your must-haves. And this is, again, getting back to what we talked about before, trying to find out the least expensive way to achieve your must-have, to meet the goals that you want. Then the next thing is, again, to keep track of your wants. And this is where a lot of us get in trouble. You know, we're going along, we're trying to save money, and all of a sudden we see something on sale or friends say, let's go out and do this. And the next thing you know, you've blown an extra $50, $60. So you got to ask yourself, are you keeping your wants under control? Because again, you need to be able to have those extras, but it's also important to keep them under control, especially if excessive use of wants is keeping you from saving and investing in the future. And again, are you saving and investing in your future? Are you actively looking at those things that you need to do? And again, you have to ask yourself, what changes or adjustments do you want to make to meet your goals? Budgets are about choices. Spending plans are about choices. And they affect you at all levels, personal, work-related, governmental. So pay attention to budget policies that affect your financial future. You know, are tax laws changing? Are you in a situation where you're allowed to save more money than you used to be able to save? Are you properly aligning your withholding with your tax bill? Find out what's going on. Talk to the people you work with. Look at government programs. Try to stay in touch with what's going on and know how it impacts you. Money action plan equals a budget. Getting started on it. Okay. Start with information from your inflow, outflow worksheets. In other words, have an inflow worksheet. Make sure you've clearly identified everything that comes into you, whether it's actual money or whether it's non-financial, something that you could use that helps you reduce your outflows. And then the next question you have to ask yourself, what changes do you want to make to improve your cash flow? Okay? And again, set yourself some time goals. Say to yourself, okay, right now I would like to save 10% of my salary. And let's say you're making $1,500 a week. Let's say you're making $3,000 a month. And you say to yourself, I'm currently only saving, say, $200 a month. I'd like to get up to $300 a month in 6 months. And my goal is to raise it by $25 each month. You know, there's a saying, what gets inspected and measured is what we work on. So you have to ask yourself, how do I get to that goal? Where do I find the opportunity to save that extra $25? And again, what money do you need to put aside in savings to work on your financial goals? So in other words, be clear. Don't just say, I want to save more money. I want to be able to have more money. Be specific. I want to save an extra $25, an extra $30, an extra $40 during this time frame. And what actions do you need to take to be able to do that? So spending plan allocations. Now these are recommended % of take-home pay and benefits that go to certain things. So in other words, The first one we'd say is savings is 10%. That's a standard that a lot of people like to use. Some cases doing 10% and figuring out how much that will be over a certain amount of time might not necessarily get you to your goal. And you might find out I need to save 15% to be able to do that. So then you look at things like transportation. It's 15%. Well, maybe that's because you have a car that's a gas guzzler. Maybe you can reduce that by finding a more efficient car. Maybe you don't need a car. Maybe you should be using the car less and maybe using a bicycle. Maybe you should be using public transportation. Food. Maybe food's 15%, but you're spending 15% and that includes going out to eat. Maybe you could reduce that. Housing. Maybe you're in a situation where you're living by yourself and maybe you can take on a roommate. These are all opportunities that you can have. Now, we have a big expense that we call other living expenses. That should be broken down to as many categories as possible, because the more categories you're able to break it down to, the better able you are to identify opportunities for savings. Let's say you have some insurance that you're paying on your car, and maybe that can be reduced. Maybe you're paying too much for gasoline and you're not really looking at it, or tolls, or all these different things. So the more you're able to spend money in categories that you could identify, the better able you are to identify the opportunities for savings. Fixed expenses. As we mentioned, fixed expenses are expenses that you have to pay every month, like rent and utilities. However, even if an expense is fixed, sometimes you can still make changes. An example is, how do you lower your utility expense? Your heating bill, maybe you're setting your thermostat at 72 and you should be setting it at 68. Conversely, maybe you're setting the air conditioning at 72 and it should be at 76. Maybe you are driving too much because you consider that something, can you save money on that? Maybe you're paying too much in rent and you could find a less expensive place. The list goes on and on. Once you've established precisely what something costs and what you're spending money on, then you have the opportunity to find opportunities to save money in those categories. Now, flexible expenses are usually the opportunities that we have that are a little bit more than fixed expenses, because they're ones that we have more control of. One thing you're going to find out when you're dealing with budgets and spending plans and trying to increase your cash flow is you're always going to have more control over what you spend than what you bring in. And that's the area where you should be looking first, is how do I reduce my expenses to increase my cash flow? And where are some of the areas? Now, one of the areas is travel and vacations, and you might say, hey, I'd be happy to be able to take a vacation. But if you can, then you look for ways to save money. But mainly what really affects a lot of people are clothing, going out to eat, and entertainment. Those are the three main discretionary things that we spend. And again, we have these impetuous spending that we do. Are you that type of person that you're spending a lot more money on things than you need to because you're not really following any discipline? So expenses can be flexible, but they're hard to control. Some days you might be going along and all of a sudden, boom, something happens to your car. And you weren't able to take care of it, and it's a big expense, but maybe it's because you didn't change your oil regularly. So you got to figure out, sometimes I got to pay to service that car to make sure I don't have a big expense later on. That's why it's so important to have savings for these hard to control flexible expenses. Again, only you could identify those areas, but it's important to make sure you know what they are and what you're currently spending on these areas. So pay attention. Keep and organize all income and expense receipts for the month to track actual income, savings, and spending. All of you, for the most part, probably have cell phones. Keep track of your cell phones. If you use a debit card or a credit card, those are perfect. Those statements can tell you precisely what you're spending money on. I'm a firm believer in using credit cards and debit cards because they help you itemize your expenses. When you pay cash, sometimes you're not really paying attention to what you're spending money on, or you're not saving a receipt. The other thing that's very important is, if you've set up a spending plan, the only way you're going to know how you're doing is to keep track of what you're actually spending. And that's where utilizing debit cards and credit cards will come to your aid in letting you know where your areas of opportunity are. And what happens once you've established that you're spending a little bit more money on going out to eat than you should, what do? You make adjustments if needed. Again, we call this mindful money management. Will help you meet your financial goals. Know what you're spending money on. Now, you got to ask yourself, the only way you ever accomplish something is to set a plan, but plan is only as good as the actions you take to do the plan. It's very important that you realize that if you don't work on your plan, then it doesn't matter. So your goals should always be improve your cash flow by reducing your expenses, maybe improving and increasing your inflows. That will help you increase your savings, move you towards meeting one of your financial goals or all of your financial goals. Very, very important. Okay, what I'd like to do is say this is our presentation. We want to thank you for all your attention and to this video, and we want to give a special thanks to Community Action Marin. SparkPoint's part of that. We're partner agency of CareerPoint Marin, and we help develop this workshop. And Community Action Marin provides free financial and career coaching and education to help community members achieve self-sufficiency. To learn more about our financial coaching and services, please contact us. Here's the address. Again, we're part of SparkPoint, and these are some SparkPoint places that you could check on and get in touch with. And again, I want to thank you again for your help. It was a pleasure being with you today.